Welcome everyone, Plan Stage Weekly, June 23rd. Gabe, you have the first point.
Just wanted to make another plug and a reminder to hopefully continue to foster alignment around this epic that we're working on starting in 14.1. Kristen put together an MVC plan for us, and the basic TLDR is we want to create a new kind of, I guess, planning objects of all planning objects that we can eventually migrate epics to. And also part of that work is creating a new issue view or planning object view. It's an issue behind the scenes. We're just calling it a planning object so everyone understands we're trying to consolidate, requirements and test cases and issues and types of issues and epics into like kind of one core object. So I just wanted to resurface that and ask if there's any feedback, concerns, questions, and maybe get some input from engineering on thinking about breaking down kind of the big MVCs even further into smaller things, or if there's a better way to tackle it. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I had a discussion yesterday with Brett, and there was a question that popped up. So I don't know if you can see my screen shared.
Yep.
And there's this idea where we will eventually, like, this is further down the implementation path, I guess. So it's not the MVC, but we wanted to clarify this nonetheless. So we have here this idea that subgroups can inherit some of the defined issue types at a higher level, right? Now, the question that popped up is, does subgroup now, is subgroup able to modify the properties of these two issue types, or they just inherit them as they are and they can add a different issue type that they can now define as they wish? So I guess the question is, are these issue types at the subgroup level exactly the same as the ones at the group level?
Yes.
Right.
And I think, just to reiterate, this is much further down the path, yeah. Right? And I think out of the gate, we just want to go to where we're going to ship with default issue types in all groups and projects, or all groups, and they would be the same. And of course, all projects would also get those. But the way that I was thinking about it eventually is the Managed Access team has worked on a cascading settings framework that sort of behaves in that same way, that lets you set things at a parent group level and then optionally choose to lock it so that children can't change the properties of things, or even like add additional settings or like add additional issue types. So I think the way that I was thinking about it is, if something is created in a parent, the parent is the one who controls the properties of it. If it's locked, then the children can't even like add additional like issue types, if that makes sense. There's a lot to figure out, and why I say this should be way down the road is just in terms of the problem that we have right now with labels. When labels are in children and they're not owned by the parent group, then like there's some weird behavior in terms of like what the parent group can filter on and what they can create boards on and things like that. So I just would keep it as simple as possible out of the gate, if that makes sense. But that's how I was thinking about it.
So yeah, I mean, again, this is down the road, but what is your vision like at the parent level group? Should people be able to filter and have have boards or lists only for bugs and features in this case, or should they be able to also have or see the tech depth and very, very specific definitions of each subgroup?
I think that the parent, since the parent, if we're thinking about an inheritance model or access model, the parent should have access to everything in the children, all like children, and be able to view things. And so the way that I would think about issue types on boards, you could maybe have a list, but I personally, if I were using it today, would use a swim lane based on type. So I could like segment it out. So if there's an incident, I can have a swim lane at the top for my incidents. I can have like for features for different things like that. That's one way that I know customers will use it, and I might as well. And so if like there isn't an issue type of tech debt in the subgroup, that's already going to be rolling up into the parent group's issue list, right? So we would need to be able to like do everything that you can do with it within the subgroup and the parent.
And what I also heard you say before was that bug and feature at the subgroup level are not immutable, meaning that the group parent could say, oh yeah, any subgroup you can change what bug is or feature is, or they always locked.
They're always locked. I don't think you would let the subgroup change properties on them. What locking wouldn't do is preventing you from adding additional issue types, right? So okay. you can only like would only be able to ever change properties on a type of issue if you have access to the group that owns that type of issue. And I could also see a world where like
it would change it for everybody.
Yeah, I could also see a world where lock would allow somebody to disable an issue type, like if they don't want to use it. Right, because that's one of the downsides from Jira that I've heard from customers is that when you have these sort of like settings that get inherited and a group doesn't use certain amounts of them, they can't turn them off, then it's just like noise. But I think staying true that only if you have access to the group that created or owns the type of issue would you be able to change anything about it.
And it would propagate across all.
Yep.
It's the same object. Okay, cool. That's
is that as simple as it could be, or can we make it simpler?
No, that helps a lot. That helps a lot.
Not using a specific issue type, like a specific inherited issue type, I think complicates things. But again, this is so far down the road that I would not bother with that just yet.
Yep. I mean, I think that the first tranche of work is getting the default issue types, kind of like what we talked about, reserving features so that we can do all the work on it, and then working on parenting and the new kind of issue view together. So that way, I think that gets us closer to what Kristen put together for her MVC. And then we can like look at each sort of field on an issue, because some of them are the behavior will change because we're adding parenting to issues.
No, you're right. We just don't want to try not to box ourselves into a corner in that direction. So.
I have a question as well. I was off for a couple days, and this may not have been discussed yet, or maybe it has, but are we talking also about having multiple templates for issue types parenting, such as requirements and test cases versus the planning object ones? Or are we going to leave that decision off until we get further down the road in terms of the designs?
Can you ask that one more time? Sorry, I think I sort of missed what you asked.
Have we looked at the structure under the hood for how we'll filter out certain types of issue types, such as requirements and test cases, which are planning objects and are used in menus and in other places? Those are currently moving on to planning objects as well. So like, have we thought about how we will have multiple hierarchies? Has that entered the engineering discussion yet?
Well, the way I understand it is that an issue is really a planning object, and we are going to be adding abilities to an issue, and that's the hierarchy and stuff like that. So anything that becomes an issue, or we could rename it planning object, that's fine, but it's really under the covers the same beast. We'll inherit whatever abilities we give, with the ability to turn things off for certain ones. The incidents and test cases are first class objects on an issue. So that means that we'll be able to filter out at our GitLab defined specific types: incident, test cases, basic issue, and requirement. And then custom issues fall under the subcategory of an issue, which feature epics, etc., would be part of.
Okay. So the
Does that help?
first class object definition, that's what I'm getting towards. What is that thing? So we're calling it first class objects.
Well, yeah,
The ones that currently exist and are in a menu and are supported. Will that always exist, or will we just differentiate them based on their issue type in the future?
well, those are at the moment, those are the hard-coded GitLab issue types.
Mhm.
In other words, the custom issue types are what customers can define, and it's a different structure because we need to provide the customability of it, customization of it. Particularly changing the name and the description and all that kind of stuff. You're not going to be able to do that with the description. I mean, I'm sorry, with the requirement or something like that. Those are kind of our hard-coded system issues.
Mhm.
And that's why I'm calling them a first-class object.
Okay.
Like, I have another question in terms of these hierarchies, and we call all of them planning objects, but to me, like, requirements or certified part of this planning object will have its own hierarchy, then the project management will have kind of its own hierarchy. Now, as a user, when I'm selecting the issue type, do I just see every single type of the issue, or like, do we need to in some way containerize these parts of the application? So if I'm in a part of the application where I manage my requirements and certifications and all that stuff, I only see this batch of issue types. And then when I'm doing project management, I'm only seeing this other batch of issue types with all of its hierarchies and so on. Do we need to have some sort of a UI UX separation between these concepts as well, or how do we handle that part?
Yeah, and that will be in the second MVC. The hierarchy will start to be discussed a bit more, but I think this is why we need to talk about it now too. There will, I think, be multiple templates for these hierarchies. And although they will behave the same way, in a certain part of the system, we may only be in planning, like in epics, and we're showing the planning object hierarchy and how those objects align together. And then with like test cases, incidents, and requirements, that's a different flow. And so creating multiple templates of these parent-child relationships will be necessary, I think.
Yeah,
But as I'm sorry, go ahead.
that will also be helpful in, like, to me, especially when you start adding custom types, when you go to a filter bar and you want to filter by a specific issue type, it will be useful to know that this issue type is within certified group or is within project management group, right? Because then when you have all these different names for the issue types that are may not exactly suggest what specifically these are describing, right? If you have, I don't know, issue type X, it's not very talking to you, like, is it for certify, is it for project management, is it, what is it for? So we'll need to somehow, I guess, separate them or group them or something like that.
But
I think. Go ahead, Brett, please.
I understand the hierarchy. There's two hierarchies that I'm seeing. One is the hierarchy that Alexander's talking about in terms of issue types. In other words, there is a defined structure of what issue type can inherit from which issue type. That seems to be a little different than the hierarchy that we put into the actual issues themselves, so that issues themselves can inherit from each other. And of course, that's limited to what the structure and the issue type hierarchy is, but they're two separate hierarchies as far as I see them. They play together, but their implementations are on the issue type and then also on the issue.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking as well.
Yeah, I would just say I think we can get a lot of mileage out of not making the hierarchies like overly configurable out of the gate. Like we can launch multi-level requirements without changing much in the UI. We could have like Surface group them within the picker so people know what they are. But I guess I want to try to defer any any sort of configurability for as long as humanly possible, right? And you are correct, like they are two separate things. There's even a third with test sessions, which are going to have test cases below them, right? So like there are going to be different ones, and we want them to be allow like work the issue types to be interlinked between them or related. So I think that's something to think about, but just guidance that while long term, we may want to make some things configurable. We want also to follow our product principles and avoid that as long as possible, right? And see if like we ship some of these things, if it resolves some of the customer needs, right? Because I think we can, especially when we have issue types in a hierarchy and we have statuses that can be kind of customized, there's going to be so much that opens the door in terms of like what that will provide without going overboard and turning into Jira.
So opinion over configuration for now.
Yeah. But I would build it in a way that when and if we do need to expose like the multiple hierarchies and allow somebody maybe to rename one of the hierarchies to be called something else that has different issue types in it, it's not like a huge lift. So does that make sense?
Yeah.
I'll just show that too in the MVC plan in terms of where we put the configuration. It was way down here at the bottom, which is renaming objects, changing the temporary or the template structure. So all the heavy lift will be on a set template hierarchy and the GitLab default objects that we're starting with. But I want to make sure also that, yeah, it can work for that. And I need to fully understand, I keep saying planning objects. To me, that is the configurable issue type under the hood that will work for all of these objects and be consistent. If there is the first class idea, I'm going to try to understand that more, understand why sometimes we're saying issue and issue type. To me, at some point, I think any of these objects could be converted into others or be displayed in any UI. So I just want to make sure that I'm grokking that nuance to how engineering is thinking about it.
That's how I'm thinking of it anyway. That's what I think our end goal eventually will be, is to a bug or all of these will be able to be hierarchical and everything. Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
Part of that confusion stems from just the words in the code. So like the issue model and issuables and things like that, like they probably won't change or like most likely won't migrate that to a new name. So it's some of that confusion is going to persist just because the difference between like what we're talking about from the actual product, like what we're creating versus what it exists as in the code base.
Okay, that makes sense.
We could maybe get something in the handbook around that, like that when we're talking about the meta issue or the issues table, we use the term planning objects. And when we're talking about issues from here on out, it's issues of type issue.
And you have to say issues of type issue, the whole phrase every time, otherwise no one will understand.
I would like the eigen issue, but I can't expect that to catch on.
I'm all for an eigen issue. That sounds good.
No, we're two. Anyone else on our side? No, but I think the general point is fair. Like, we need to sort of standardize on nomenclature. Otherwise, like there's a lot of confusion just coming from the fact that we're using different terms for everything, and some of those terms overlap.
We could do that right now. So we have what is it? What is the difference between a planning object and an issue? Or I guess what do we want to call the thing that is the core like master object, eigen issue, whatever?
No, see, that's the thing. The eigen issue would have been the issue of type issue, like, which I would propose that we simply call issues because that's what we'll call them in the interface. And the issues of any type could be called planning objects. In fact, we could probably rename the table in the database if it wasn't a painful thing to do, planning objects instead. Unless anyone has any opposing views on that.
That would be the existing issue table.
Right.
The issue. Okay.
I'm just saying we could. I'm not saying we should, but since we're going to refer to everything as planning objects anyway, when we say like a requirement is a planning object, an epic is a planning object, an issue is a planning object, we might as well refer to the issues table and the meta object as a planning object. And then when we say issues, we're specifically referring to the type issue.
Yeah,
Yeah,
just
so
for- Go
planning
ahead, Alan.
object essentially replaces what we were considering issuables in the past. And then an issue is a planning object that's an issue type.
So just for context, planning object came about because initially when working with UX and doing some UX sprints, there's confusion about the goal or the outcome of would an epic become an issue? Like what is the thing, right? And so I think that's where we set that to remove confusion. We called it a planning object for that case, but we already have issues. We already have an issue table, and then we have types of issues. So I don't see a ton of value in like renaming it to something else just for renaming it, if we all understand what the goal is now.
Well,
Yeah, the problem is if I say to you, if I talk to you about an issue, am I talking about an issue of type issue or the issues table generally?
I like that. I think we came around to fairly good understanding there, as long as we use the issue type to differentiate the object or the actual name, I guess. And in reference to the generic object, it would be planning object instead of, maybe it's just issuables need to get replaced with planning object as a term. That way we can stop correcting each other.
It gets a little, well, and this is just at this point just confusion for the sake of it, but it gets a little bit more confusing because issuable is not like a model technically, like it's not. Never mind.
Right.
It's like
it's a section of the
Merge requests are issuables.
functionality.
Epics are
right,
issuables.
merge
Yeah.
requests are
No,
issuables.
Yeah. It's
Mhm.
it's a common thing. But okay, so just so I'm again clear, planning object, it's not an epic. It is this thing that with this super issue, this thing that we're adding all these attributes to, that we're making configurable or whatever. That's what a planning object is. And epics fall under that, and requirements will fall under that, and everything falls under that. But this is the new, right? The new meta issue.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and whatever our customers end up naming them, once we open that up way down the road, they could be anything too. So
Yeah,
the object's
exactly.
the same, the name is just meta.
Yeah, exactly.
Somebody kindly redefine issue for me so I can write it down.
That's just a name of a planning object. It's a type.
Well, issue would then become the subtype that is really what everybody else today fits under, right? If we were starting greenfield, we wouldn't even maybe have something called issue. It would be our bug and feature and task and all that kind of stuff. Issue just happens to be what we all live with now because that's, that's the main thing. So and I guess
How's that?
huh?
I said I captured that in the notes. It's a type of planning object, so we can migrate all existing issues to a type issue. So it's like instead of forcing every user to like pick a different thing so we basically can launch it working by default. This is like the way that we enable that.
Yeah. The only thing is I don't, it may be confusing eventually why you have an issue in the list and then a bug in the list and a feature in the list and what's the difference between a feature an issue and the other objects. That was kind of my stumbling point in terms of usability, but yeah, it gets us migrated easy.
They will end up being filters in almost every view as well. That will be their main, the ability to separate them out.
Yeah, but there's no difference there won't be any difference between an issue and a bug, let's say. I mean, the issue would just happen to be the generic name that we had in order to get everybody on the new system. There's no inherent value in it that I can see. right? Or are we going to be able to put a real usability
Concept.
piece around it? That's a default. You should create all your issues because that's the main thing, and then you can create bugs and tasks and other stuff.
Mhm. Bugs could be system generated, they could be user generated, where the other objects are created by the team. But yeah, under the hood, they would be the same.
I think that's where, from a usability standpoint, if we're adding descriptions to like types of issues, we can even hard code the descriptions for each one. And like, to me, I see the issue as a catch-all for things that aren't something of the other kind.
Well, what description would you write for that?
A generic, I would have to think about it, but something along the lines of generic issue to, I don't know. It's a great question, but we can figure it out.
Defining a problem or something like that.
And down the
let's have a
line,
discussion.
it's possible that we retire that one down the line too, right?
The bug.
I mean,
Well, you'd have to
as we
rename it to
offer-
something else because
As we offer the default types and customers can change them, they can rename the issue to whatever fits them the best.
That's what I was thinking.
Or get rid of it. Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, we'll have different models of project or product management as well, like safe and things where people could change their whole setup to use a different set of rules or hierarchies. And do an easy switch between them.
Well, the only reason it's a little bit of a stomach block, particularly in terms of migration, is that what we don't want to do is have to update a 5 million row table now with pointers to a new thing called an issue type called issue. So that means that we leave issue as a generic standard object. It's one of the what I call the first class ones, but it doesn't have a specific subtype. He just kind of defaults. We happen to name it issue with some kind of description. But in order to make it configurable, you've got to do a bunch of stuff on the database backend in order to fill in extra rows and all this kind of stuff. So anyway, we just need to think through it some more. That's all. Sorry to derail here.
I'm also wondering if we can do like instead of doing whatever migration all at once, if we start doing it behind the scenes over a couple of releases, and if there is a way to limit it to some sort of namespace or something, we don't have to do it all at once if we can figure out a way. But I do think that eventually making the issue one of those generic customizable types will allow people to get rid of it if they don't want to use it.
So just to clarify, there's customizable type, but that is not a subtype of issue. Like where does bug sit in this? Is that a subtype of issue, or is that a first class object, or is it a custom object in the future?
I think everything is a first class object. It's just the type says what type of that planning object. So planning object is the first class object, right? And then you have different labels on this planning object: bug, issue, ticket, epic, whatever. So it is a first class object in itself. Now, when it becomes a subtype, well, I would not call it a subtype, but how I see it is when we do define the inheritance between the types, then is when you can put a bug underneath an issue or an epic, or however you want to define the hierarchies. That's when it kind of becomes sort of a subtype, but it's still not a subtype. It's still a first class object to me.
Can I jump in, Alexandra? I have a slightly different understanding of that. The issues today already have an issue type, meaning it could be issue, test case, incident, requirement, I think that's it. That's what I've been calling a first class. We can name it something else, but those are, I get this object and the type is hard coded into the issue. Okay, in the actual issue row.
Yeah,
But we're going to be adding custom issue type, which means we can subcategorize an issue. So any issue, the actual object, our issue object or planning object, whatever we're going to rename it to, or however we're going to call it, will have an issue type column and a custom issue type column.
nope.
Yeah.
My understanding was that issue type will point, so the issue type column, right, will point to a type that is customized by the customer. So if they add a new type called, I don't know, new object, then this issue record will point to that type. So it cannot be in two types at the same time. It's either our predefined type or it's the customer's custom type. It cannot be both a bug and the customer's custom type.
Yeah, my expectations was saying that by customizing issue types, we just extend the family of these hard-coded predefined set of types. Yeah, you just add more to this family. Yep. But that's not that we would add two different families, which could be both set.
Well, but we can't use the enum that's sitting in the issue table. Okay.
Yeah,
we will
move that to the table. So the enum will become a table. Okay.
Yeah, that's what the custom issue type column is it points to that table. When Gabe and I talked a little bit about it several weeks ago, the desire was not to have customizability on test cases or in terms of renaming and all that stuff. So it was only issue type that was going to be customizable by the customer. So in that case, we can currently leave all of our issue types. And when you've got an issue type of issue, then you can have custom types, different name, different whatever. Okay. That was the original concept of that. And
yes.
and that way we don't have to migrate 5 million, 10 million rows into something else, which of course we can do, but
my understanding was slightly different, that the enum becomes now a table with those specific IDs in the table.
It does. It does, but we're still keeping the normal issue type column. And we get rid of that, but that was the initial step. That was to get us to the MVC to actually start supporting this stuff without completely disrupting everything.
Yeah, I think this approach might work too. Now I wonder how we got to this point. I mean, what would be a problem regarding this plan of migrating to issue types with using this special customized issue type in addition to hard-coded ones?
Well, because then we're going to have to do more work to make sure when you want to filter by type of issue, you have to look across two columns. That would be one thing I would think. And the way that I was thinking about it is just that if you treat issue types all the same, the first class ones that we are now, the only thing is it's just their system defaults and they're not editable, right? But that doesn't mean that I don't know if we want to treat them differently. And it's totally up to the engineers. It's an implementation decision that I'm definitely not the DRI for. So it's whatever y'all think, but whatever we can do to keep things as simple as possible and make sure that whatever we're doing is the most performant approach we can take. That's what I care about.
So for filtering, I would expect that you just use it as filter by custom issue type, or do you expect some other filtering?
Well, if you're on a board, you might want to filter by, let's say the filter bar, you have a drop down, filter by incident or filter by test case, right? That's a really common use case when I talk to Sarah and Monitor is people on boards want to be able to have swim lanes for different types, like maybe a swim lane for an incident, a swim lane for your different custom types.
Yeah.
So there are places where if we get to the point even where we allow people to have a little bit more control over how they set up their views, where they want to create a view that has requirements and like test cases, or it just, I think the types all need to be treated the same in the back end, so we don't run into this weird thing where we're having to like mash together a bunch of different things. But that's just an opinion. So
it might add additional complexity for treating then all the custom issue types same as hard-coded ones. So maybe it's something to discuss.
Yeah, I'm happy to go. I'm happy to go look at that again because it's been a couple months. So.
I'm happy to take it offline with you, Brett, because I think I'm a bit lost in the difference between issue type and custom issue type, but I'm happy to discuss it afterwards.
there's also,
Sure.
I left a comment on one of the issues, Brett, that you were working about default types, that if we add a type called issue, then you can migrate all of the existing type issues to that type issue, right? And then eventually, if people, like you mentioned usability challenges, like what is an issue for then if I have a feature and these other things, we can kind of sort that out, but that would also allow us to get to a migration where it's working by default. And we don't even have to have any configuration to let them enable custom types or whatever. It's just, you have issue, everyone has issue types, right? And that way there's like a standard approach, but we can follow up offline too.
Okay, let's spin up a thread on the implementation issue discussion, and so we can like capture it there. I think from my perspective as a sort of third party here, I think you guys might be actually pretty close to agreement on the way you're talking about it, and it's just a confusion, but maybe I'm misunderstanding too. It sounds not too terribly different, so hopefully there's yeah, we can figure it out and move forward.
Thanks, everyone. That was good discussion. Marcin, did you want to ask your question?
Yeah, hi. So I've started thinking about these planning objects, like, because some of this discussion sounded like quite back end, because like what is in what table is not as important to end users, right? But then do we want to start using planning object in the documentation, how we talk about these things? And like I said, I'm also thinking about how we're going to talk about the feature object. And before we started discussing this here, I added this point, by the way, to the plan office hours later today, to think about it more, or we can move this whole discussion there. John, do you want to vocalize?
Yeah, sure. I think in the developer docs, possibly we might want to, like, as I said before, nomenclature matters, like, but from the user's perspective, I don't think they need to care about planning objects. They rather care about features, bugs, stories, epics, issues. And we should maybe even avoid using it in public facing documentation.
Makes sense.
We'll probably still need to use some terms in like the docs around certain key object types, but like epics or things that people are looking for in a product. But yeah, I think focusing on the types would be the main push. And potentially we could call them planning objects with our customers. We'd have to see how that rolls. It makes sense to me, but you can change planning object type versus telling them you can change issue type. People seem to not like the word issue in some cases.
Yeah, there has been a couple customers that are off put by the term issue because they think it's a bad thing.
Yeah, it sounds like a problem.
What would they prefer?
Everyone has a different opinion.
Feature.
All right, like whatever they're actually trying to do. So in some cases, like they might want a user story. In other cases, a support ticket, like something like that. I don't know.
This sort of gets back to why, like, this one bit with the name, we want to eventually make configurable, because we want to allow people to feel comfortable referring to things, collaboration objects, what is the issue now in their terms of their business domain and how they talk about it. So like, I don't know how we remove issue completely from the UI, but if we can find a path to do that and like allow people to like still know what the types are and things like that, then that's great. And I think the Jira is, at least NextGen has done a good job about balancing that, where it's still called an issue behind the scenes, but they've limited that in the UI at lots of places. So you just see the types of issues.
I think for people running software projects, perhaps the open source software projects and things like that, the word issue is like an industry standard term, you know, our main competitors use. So from that perspective, we probably want to keep it in there, like as an option at least.
Yeah, I guess my perspective, I think it's like a legacy term that came about from where all these trackers came from, which is bug tracking, right? But now people have taken this concept and expanded it to track like agile work, right? And so now there's like all these different things, but at the core, a lot of these tools still have the origin of issue tracking, right? Like bug tracking, and they've just like kept the terminology. At least that's the case with Jira and Bugzilla and a bunch of these tools.
Zendesk. I think Zendesk calls them tickets.
What other places other than like the sidebar where we say directly issues? Do we have any like other major places where we use that name? Can that be replaced by, I don't know, plan, and then you have list and whatnot there, and then just have all of the objects that you have there? Like, I'm not an expert, but just saying, if we don't have a lot of the usages of the issues name within the UI, maybe we can just fairly easily get rid of that. I don't know.
Right now, it's mostly the lists, I believe, the list pages and the URLs.
Yeah, maybe in some edit forms and auto completion and other places where basically you can connect with an issue or reference it, which might be from referencing in text and in forms when creating some other resource or linking issues together.
Hey Gabe, do you want to specify? I'm not sure what you mean by type issues. Type issue in the last thing you typed?
So if we want to make issue types work by default, we currently have hard coded the type issue, the type requirement, the type test case, and the type incident, right? So we have, if we are going to migrate to like an issue types table, then we sort of have to support the current type issue. Otherwise, we can't make it work by default, and we'll force or require customers to sort of like pick a different type when they're doing the migration. So thinking about it that way, like how do you take everyone from this hard-coded thing to this other thing, right? And make it work by default. I think that was the challenge. And so one of the proposals to solve that is to add a type issue. So we can literally migrate all the hard-coded types to this now like types table. And then eventually, if the customer doesn't want to use type issue, they can rename it to whatever they want. If that makes sense. That's just one idea. So.
Right. I think I'm gonna have to think about it a bit more. Sorry, again.
Yeah, one question about issue types. These are planned to be defined on group level or project level? I mean, custom issue types.
I would say,
both.
Go ahead.
I would say at the group level, because that, if we're talking about inheritance, that's the only way to do it. But we can also do it at the project level, knowing that groups and projects are going to merge into namespaces probably or something similar. So it's really whatever will be we can make it not customizable until we get them, like the merge happens some form or fashion. But if we do want to make them customizable, doing it at the highest possible level, so you only do it in one place, would be the desired behavior from a customer standpoint, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Thanks.
Are there any other, I know we're almost out of time. We've got 2 minutes here. Any other questions, concerns, things we could take offline? I think that's the end then of the agenda. Just a reminder, we do have team day events during the day today. I'm definitely going to join the next one and maybe the later one. We'll see.
You can check the Plan social channel for some of the incredible artwork that was created this morning that should, of course, be recorded for posterity. Future
Yeah,
generations.
have you gotten a call
will-
from the Louvre yet, John? To get that, get that thing put in?
When we
If
were
only
playing
you
in
knew.
Create, like Roman would set up his iPad and had like a stylus and he was killing it. So hot tip, if you do have an iPad and you can run Drawsaurus, I think it works really well.
Or
Yeah,
if you
Keenan
don't.
was the same way. That's
Yeah.
cheating though.
Yeah, it should be lowest common denominator, really.
Yeah, just on the phone with like sticky, sweaty fingers. That's my plan.
Forearm.
You have to use keyboard mouse
capability.
movements. Like you can't even use a mouse, just
Straight
like,
angles.
use the keyboard arrows. Yeah.
Vim shortcuts only, right?
Yeah.
That's an issue. There you go.
All right. Thanks everyone.
Right.
See you all at that
Bye, everybody.
social call.
Bye.
Bye.